Hi, security researchers. So today I came up with very interesting topic that every security researcher will definitely going to love that, which is the Open Web Application Security Project. Yes, you heard it right. Now, if we talk about the OWASP, it consists of all the representation of broad variety of risk, severity, vulnerabilities in which is available in the web application. Now, before jumping to 2021 list, we are following the top 10 list of vulnerabilities from the list of 2017. And if we talk about 2017 list, these can be stated as the A1, which is injection, A2, which is broken authentication, A3, which is sensitive data exposure, A4, that is XML, external entity. If we talk about A5, that is broken access control, A6, security misconfiguration, A7, cross-site scripting, A8, insecure deserialization, A9, using component with known vulnerabilities, and A10, which is insufficient login and monitoring. Now, as we all know, like with respect to time, people changes, and this is only just a list of vulnerabilities. Jokes apart, but if we talk about 2021 list, which is again an updated list of all top 10 vulnerabilities, which will be find in the web application. So these can be stated as if we talk about A1, which is replaced with broken access control in the 2021 list. If we talk about A2, that is cryptographic failure, A3, injection, A4, insecure design. If we talk about A5, that is security misconfiguration, A6, vulnerable and outdated component, A7, identification and authentication failures, A8, security and data integrity failures, A9, security logging and monitoring failures, and A10, that is server-side request forgery. Now, according to the Web Application Security Project, there are some few changes has been done in each of the vulnerability and the positions of these lists. So let's see what all are changes and what the position has been changed from the older one, that is from the 2017 and from the 2021. Let's come to the very first vulnerability category, that is BAC, that is broken access control. And from 2017 to 2021, it came up from 5th position to the first position in the updated list. And if we talk about the percentage of this vulnerability, around approximately 94% of the applications were tested from in some form of broken access control. And apart from that, 34 common weaknesses, vulnerabilities, or we can say the enumeration associated to broken access control had more recurrence in the application other than other categories of the of this particular list. Now coming to the second category, that is cryptographic failure. Previously, we have sensitive data exposure, which is clearly understandable by the title of this particular category. And now we have a question. You must arrive a question why your data or your sensitive data will be exposed, or what are the root causes of exposing those sensitive data. And the one and only reason is weak cryptographic failure. And if you're not care about your cryptographic algorithm, then your data or your sensitive data may expose in plain text, or the weak algorithm can be decrypted easily to get that data in a readable format, which is again a very critical issue, right? Which is again a very critical vulnerability in order to get your sensitive data in a readable format, which is not supposed to be planned in your application architecture. Now, the almighty category is A3, that is injection. Have you ever feel like when you have power to exploit something and no one is giving shit about that? The same exactly is feel by injection category. Now, injection category goes down from position first from the 2017 list to the position third in the 2021 list. Now, so this is not because of the applications are secure. That means the developers or the security engineers are aware about the consequences of this particular category, and they have already provided the mitigations for those categories, for those vulnerabilities. And if we talk about the injection, so it may contain SQL injection, it may contain OS command injections, it may contain LDAP injections. And the best part of this injection is if you are able to identify those vulnerabilities or those bugs in the source code review itself before the application will go into the production environment, that will be the very best practice to do so, because that is something which we can be identified prior to the production environment, or prior to the deployment to the production environment, or prior to the live of that application. In this way, we can able to secure our application. We can able to secure our data, our sensitive data, which we are going to store in our databases. Okay, so coming to our next category, that is insecure design, and a complete new category that will focus on the design of the architecture of your application or the product. Now, I'm not sure if you heard about that or not, but there is a process called threat modeling where we identify the attack vectors over what the architecture is applied, what exactly the architecture has been created with all the components and all the endpoints of the application that will create a complete environment for your application, whether it can be your network side, whether it can be your application server, whether it can be your database configuration, whether it can be your complete architecture where you have provided all the users experiences, user management, roles and management, and other sort of restrictions that can only be able to access or perform some required actions, like to whom you will be providing those resources or those access for the same. So that is considered to be an insecure design, and we have to identify like what should be the attack vector in your architecture so that you can configure that accordingly and you can secure your application architecture. So our next category is security misconfiguration. And we most of the time encounter some of the issues like directory traversal, some of the issues like default admin credentials or default credentials, user credentials, we can say, and some of the issues like detailed error messages, which is not supposed to be which is not supposed to be present in your running environment, or we can say the production environment. So you need to change all these default credentials, all these default informations, or we can say the configurations in your production or in the wherever you are using in your environment. So you need to take care of those resources, those configuration with respect to your requirements. So like if you are not doing this, so you will be able to hack, you will be able to access unauthorized way, like all your data and sensitive data will be exposed somehow, some way. So these need to be changes as soon as possible. Like if you are planning to use any third party application or third party module which has a default credentials, to test that environment in order to check like if that particular module or the tool is helpful for you or worthy for you or not for your product itself. Now coming to our next category, that is vulnerable and outdated component. Now if we talk about this particular category, that is vulnerable and outdated component, if this can be considered only when you are not aware about like what exactly the version of the component you are using in your application or the product, what module version you are using in your product, and though if that particular version you are using is vulnerable to some of the vulnerability or not. So that can be the possibilities, like if you are using one version or one service having a version called 1.0, and if you find some way somehow like that particular 1.0 version has some of the vulnerabilities and you are still using in your application, that means if that particular module is vulnerable, indirectly or directly your application is also vulnerable to that vulnerability, that existing vulnerability in your module or the module you are using in your application. Same way, this will be considered to be the service or the databases you are using. Let's say if that particular database you are using in your application has some of the amount of or we can say some of the number of vulnerabilities which is reported in the previous version of your database, like the database you are using, right? Now you have forgot to change or forgot to update that particular database version, and in that particular version, that particular vulnerabilities still exist because you are using the same version which is reported, which is vulnerable to most of the vulnerabilities or vulnerabilities reported to that version. So in order to mitigate those, you need to update your database version in order to secure our application or the architecture you design for your product, right? Now coming to our next category, that is identification and authentication failure. Now this title is completely understandable by what exactly the type and the nature of this particular vulnerability. Now the user identification, user authentication and user session management need to be taken care of each and every application where if the nature of the application is in user interactive, where the end user will be interacted some of the actions or the some of the functionality which is provided by again the service or the software. Now this can be arise due to allowing the automatic, or we can say the automated softwares or the tools to brute force the username and password. It may arise due to not having the proper input credential validations, and it may arise due to the dispose of not disposing the sessions after users log out. And there is again one point which is very important, that is missing of multi-factor authentication in your, or we can say in the end user's account, so that it will not be able to authenticate the user's identity, right? Now coming to our next category, that is software and data integrity failure. So have you heard about checksum? No. So have you heard about driving license? I guess yes. Now driving license will provide you, or will allow you to drive the vehicle that give a unique identification that okay, you are allowed to run or to drive any of the vehicle in your country. So similarly, checksum will provide a unique identification, or we can say the permission where this application will be providing some of the unique number which gives that okay, like whatever the software you are downloading from whatever the website, it is downloading from the authenticated source only, or we can say the trusted source only. Now if you are not downloading those softwares from the trusted softwares, or we can say the trusted website, you might get into the trouble, like you will get a Trojan install, or you will get a rat install in your machine, or you will get some virus, or we can say the malware install in your application or in your machines. So that can be the risk. It can be done like one, if you are not downloading those applications or the software from the trusted sources or trusted website. So in order to do that, you always need to check what exactly checksum is provided over the website, and what exactly checksum you are getting after downloading that application or the tool or the software from that particular website. So that's the only thing in this category that we need to check, like the checksum. Only word is checksum. Now our next category, that is security login and monitoring failure. Now again, the title is very understandable, very we can say very general, that you need to monitor each and every log that is generated, or that is created, or that is stored in the log files in your application. So what happen is, like if you are not be able to monitor, or if you are not able so if you not monitoring your application's log, it might contain some of the information that is not supposed to stored in your log files or in your application server. If that will happen, it might create a problem in your application server, or the application itself, or the product itself. Let's take an example to clarify, to understand this in a very simpler manner. So we work in a company where we usually see all the security cameras or the CCTV cameras, right? Now there are two scenarios. If we are doing something which is not which is against the policy of the company, then everyone can see in the recorded session of that CCTV camera, right? Now that need to be monitored at 24 hours from one of the person that will monitor each and every action for each and every person, what he or she doing at that particular time period. Now the second scenario will be, if in your company you have see that security cameras are implemented, but those security cameras are not working anymore. So whatever you are doing, there is no record, there is no proof that this person has done this particular action, which might cause a disruption in your companies, or which might cause a loss in your company with that particular person. But there is no evidence like this is the only person, or that person is the only responsible for this particular action. So similarly goes with your login or monitoring in your application server, we can say. Okay, so this is the last category of the OWASP top 10 vulnerability list, that is SSRF, which means server-side request forgery. Now, before jumping actual concept of this vulnerability, let me tell you an example. Have you ever experienced that you have called to your friends and his or her father picked that particular call, which is completely unexpected, right? The same thing happens in the SSRF vulnerability. Now, what exactly does it mean? The application will respond to unvalidated URL, which is passed at the time of request, and it get the unexpected response after sending the request to the application server. Now, if we talk about the attacker perspective, when an attacker can craft a request, irrespective of like whatever the request, the original request is sending to the application server, if that will allow at the time of response or the application server, now attacker can get an access to craft that particular request and can get the data which is not supposed to be get responsed from the application server. And this result, this SSRF is increased and the severity of this particular vulnerability is so high. So that's it for today. And I hope I was able to give the simpler explanation of those vulnerabilities category wise. And if you want a separate explanation of these vulnerability, please do a comment and please mention like what exactly and how in specific way you want explanation, whether it can be a theoretical, whether it can be a practical. I will try to provide you that particular content in terms of each and every category of this OWASP 2021 list. So thank you. Bye bye.